shaved for the first time in years. I look ridiculous. It's a little philosophy for the day. Not a little, but it all goes into freedom of thought and imagination and religion and my expansion of Plato's Cave. So when I expanded Plato's Cave, I did so to explain how we can corrupt and control and guide the mind to falsity, right? Falsity. Anyway, so as we all know with Plato, the cave, you're locked up facing towards a wall, somebody is behind, and they can only see shadows, and the people that face the wall can only really speculate what's going on behind them. Well, what I condoned is that we take this room, and now it's a network of rooms in a cave, and each room has people, and there's all sorts of variables. That people are locked facing the wall, that people are behind them chained up to, and the people behind them are trying to escape, and the people likewise on the other side. And there's just, every room contains a different variable. That doesn't necessarily matter. That's for a different derivative of philosophy. The expansion happens when you're magically released and you wander the cave. You never enter any rooms, maybe you can look in and it doesn't really matter for now. Eventually, you realize that, well, hold on. Okay, so that initial person who wanders the cave, he can die in there, say. So if he dies, another person is released. They're released in succession so that they can figure out where the exit is. Eventually, one person understands that if they follow the right side of a cave, or the left side, any wall specifically throughout, it doesn't lead you in a circle. If there's like a circle, then the floor you can follow. So you eventually follow one of the walls, and in any maze, it leads out. So as you exit the cave, and you have your great epiphany, blah, 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 of Plato itself, you get to see reality as it actually is. And to your recollection, it's just nature and blue skies. And so you think, wow, I can go back in and release other people. And you could go back in and let them wander, or he can guide them out. He doesn't have to tell them the secret of how to get out of the cave. He can if he wants. However, all those other people, he's one of a group that survived exiting the cave through cognition. He figured out the solution. The other people would, if they were freed and left to their means, a majority of them would too die and rot in the cave, never seeing the light of day. Now he is free to go back in, free whoever he wants, and he can decide how to explain how he left. He can manipulate, he can dictate, he can, he's left with all sorts of potential, right? He could fabricate, say, oh, something just miraculously freed me. But if there's a logical exit, somebody had to have freed me, but nobody else is alive in this cave. How did I get here to begin with? Anyway, so what that shows is how we can guide and manipulate the mind, right? Anyway, what it has to do with how variables and derivatives exist, that every room is then set up for an individual person Every single person. That is like our one mind with a billion of other minds walking in one reality, though there are a billion individual realities that are possible. So that's infinite potential, basically. We can have as much diversity because of cognition. We can always assess different variables. It's when you're left in the room alone. So now then we lock every room up and nobody can escape. That is reality. There is no cave, there's no exit, there is no world outside. And like religion, you're sitting in that room, there's a door that leaves. Now maybe you came from the outside, or maybe you've always been in there. That doesn't matter. It's just that with religion, we were believing that somebody's on the outside of this door listening to us, though they never talk to us. They never actually communicate. They never bang on the door. They don't do anything. But you're still talking to somebody that's standing outside of the door. That's like basically religion, right? Well, with philosophy is understanding a law of paradox, and it's all paradoxes. There could be somebody out there, and then just like Schrodinger, you never know until you open the door, right? So in this sense, you are the cat, basically. And so you're left with a guitar. You put a guitar in the room. I use the guitar because it's complicated. The strings, the chords, the structures, everything is complicated with a guitar. It's not like a violin, which is just straight up and down. And pianos too. They're all just semitones up and down. Guitars are very much more complicated with the chord structures. And so if we left somebody in that dark room, they have no idea what reality is, and we left, say, now, all of humanity, each one in these rooms, in these caves. And we each gave them a guitar. Who would rewrite music? Would it become more organic? Would it be without measures? Who would write string theory or music theory? So what all that has to do is with the law of free will. For there to be something, there must be nothing for it to exist in. And that's not the law of free will. This is the paradox of philosophy. This is the only law of philosophy. Though I speculate there are two others, but I don't want to address those now. In that for something to exist, there must be nothing for it to exist in. So that compounds endlessly. No matter how big the room, for you to call it a room, there must be nothing for it to exist in. There has to be something outside of it. Just like the universe. No matter where we set our boundaries, it could still be nothing further out. But we call that a galaxy. And that galaxy is inside of a empty vacuum. And that compounds endlessly, right? So for matter to simply be blinked into existence, if we look at, say, most deities that are believed to have been around for all eternity, always have, always will, why can't you understand that matter too was most likely always there, always has, and always will be? Just like the universe, just like the compounding paradox of philosophy. And the definition of philosophy, thus, is everything and nothing. And so that all goes into 1 versus 100, is where the expansion of Plato's cave and all this rationalization comes into. What does it mean for people? What is democracy? Why do we use it to govern ourselves? What is being a Republican? What is being a free thinker? 1 versus 100 is the value of the self-indulged versus the self-righteous. And though both men are self-indulged and self-righteous, one does not define his value by the numbers he guides out of the cave. So the one man is a particular type to leave the cave, come back in and free. Doesn't necessarily control or guide, he just tries to educate people and find the other ones that then would understand how to consistently find their way out of the cave, as a metaphor. The 100 is the guy that then goes back in and dictates. He tells people, he controls people, he doesn't give them the opportunity, and that derives our states of reality. And with education, we are doing just this very same thing. And this is why philosophers cannot be educated or taught. They have to be natural. Otherwise, you're already manipulated. And thus, many roads lead to the same conclusions. And you get into this circular reasoning, these paradoxes that chase one another. And it can all be very confusing to normal people. But as long as many roads lead to the same conclusions, the one will eventually have 100. Except now they're all independently thinking. They each, when released, would know how to leave the cave. And that creates a very strong society. Rather than one guiding 99 other people that then could have been left to wander the cave, of which a majority would wander endlessly and never understand how to find the exit. And with education, that's very similar to what we're doing. And, we don't leave people behind necessarily. So in the Valley of the One versus the 100, with every idea, there are two states, right? For something to exist, there must be nothing for it to exist. And so you have those bouncing back and forth to one another. Just like the 1 versus the 100, you have a third. So then it creates a triad, right? What is the third? Well, it's balancing the two. Another one goes over there, and another leader goes over there. And then they reflect off of one another into this structure that eventually, through time, we become, without weeding the other out, strong as a whole to understand, say, why a master of none and the master of one can coexist is that if you have 100 masters of 100 different things versus a master of none, he can beat them all at the other people's things, but once he gets to that trait of another and another and another, he can't beat that individual at their specific skill and trait. And so that's the value of philosophy, essentially. And when you get into physics and how reality works, you need philosophy just as much as you need math. If you're just coming at it from math and you don't have an imagination, you're not a physicist. You're just a mathematician. You're letting the numbers corrupt everything. And as I've been mentioning in all my videos about why 10 isn't a number, why did I figure that out? Why didn't anybody else? Why does everybody else that I bring it up to say, it doesn't matter the system we use? Because it's all concept, right? It's all variables. No, the variables are from philosophy. Those outline the number systems. The number system then makes that work so that we can be practical with it. However, as we all know, we know nothing, right? Because number theory rounds everything. Number theory is inexact. And anyway, so number theory is inexact, and thus every time you calculate something, you're always a little bit off. You're not vectoring perfectly at an actual infinitesimally small vectoring scale. For something to exist, there must be nothing for it to exist in. Oh. I think he's gonna let him count out the numbers now. People. Anyway, with number theory, we get into that state of mind that without philosophy, mathematician is just a mathematician. And without math, a philosopher cannot properly achieve physics. It's just that the variables outline. As we know nothing. So I have to recap because of all the distractions I have to live with now. The hypocrisy drives me mad. Alright. Since everything we're calculating, we know literally nothing, right? We cannot vector an infinitesimally small amount. No small number, which is our fundamental value. That is our something that exists in nothing. So what all this has to do is just endless thinking that I do. This all goes back into why, one, we need... I was thinking we should change freedom of religion to freedom of the imagination. No. What we need to do is add on a bill that says freedom of the imagination. So then, the religious can't turn me into an antichrist or a criminal or some disease, just as we can't turn them into a disease because of their lack of ability to find an exit from the cave properly. Which then goes into why religion is a moral stepping stone. It's a halfway point. It's a system of moral fiber. Great. Love it. Really do. But when you're not self-aware, it's scary. And that self-awareness goes back into 1 versus 100 and how the value of self-righteousness and self-indulgence create this paradox of hypocrisy. And though, what would you rather have? Would you rather be one standing next to somebody who you understand thoroughly through this brilliant, just old American way of thinking, that the neighbors will defend each other and leave each other at peace, sort of thing, right? Or do you want to be the 100 where you don't actually know how to doubt and choose? And so that's where Descartes comes into a lot of brilliant analysis, right? For us to know, we must first doubt everything. It's not a perfect quote, but it's going way longer than I thought. I was in the shower, I was like, I'll make a short video. My brain just meanders. Like philosophy, all the paradoxes. Anyway, so the 100, how do we know that we are the one that gathered 100 like-minded people? Well, you start taking out certain leaders, you start taking out certain directives, certain directions. How do you handle it? How do you sustain, do you keep civilization as it is now? Or is civilization simply just a guidance? Is it really optimal? Is it perfect? What do we do once we start removing all these opinions in law? What is law? Why is it? And what is justice? I can talk about this all forever, and I've been thinking about this shit for almost 10 years now, so it's all in my brain. I deleted all of my old work, all my old thought experiments, everything, to test myself. And it's still up there, and so it's all the same. Some of the thought experiments have changed a little bit, become more refined, and there's a lot more opportunity in a lot of them. But basically, the expansion of Plato's cave and why it's so valuable is every one of those rooms is basically a home. When you get to leave the cave, you're chained up, you're looking at your wall, which has a TV on it. TVs are the shadows. People walking outside and talking are the shadows. Those are your senses telling you what's happening behind you that you do not have knowledge of. And the exit of our cave, it's the boundary of space and time, right? So at first we thought our exit was into nature, into the forest, into seeing and choosing what reality is. Or testing it. Maybe that guy who exits the cave, before he goes back in, he grabs a leaf and he wants to speculate with another captive. But then you exit the atmosphere. That's your second cave, right? Just compounds. And that's how philosophy tends to be. Until you reach the separate dimensions of paradoxes that then end the cyclic reasoning. And then it all goes into how to make choices properly and shit like that. But does that violate 1 versus 100?